everyone. Welcome to the Self-Agency Advocate podcast. I'm your host, Amanda, and this is a space where we explore, discover, and share tools, techniques, and wisdom to help you build and maintain a sense of agency. Awesome. So welcome, everyone, to the Self-Agency Advocate podcast. So good to have you here, and I am over the moon excited for this next guest because there's just so much magic and just truth to everything that you offer, and I'm really excited to see how this conversation unfolds. So I've got Dion Freeman with me today, and so much of what I want to get into is really about what it looks like to have that cultural side of things, because one of the traditions that I most resonate with that you offer is the Maori techniques and the healing modalities that you work with, like the hono hono and the cultural medicine that you bring forward. And I remember the first time that I came across some of your advertising. It was on Facebook, and for whatever reason, I was just so called to it. It wasn't something that I would typically notice, and just seeing it, I was like, yep, I need a session with this guy. Like, it has to happen no matter what. And I just remember booking on and being like, I have no idea what to expect, so here we go. And then when I met you, I was like, oh yeah, that's why I had to do this, because you're so special, and the gift that you have is just so profound and so incredibly potent. And I think I became like your biggest ambassador after that point. I was like screaming your name from the rooftops because I was like, everyone needs to experience what this is. And it's just been pure magic to have you not only as a teacher and a mentor, but as a friend as well. It's been a really beautiful connection. So thank you so much for being here today.
Kia ora, thank you very much. And yeah, it was very interesting from my point of view, coming into Queenstown, sort of not knowing the lay of the land, and you were my first client, and pretty much booked out from your recommendation for the whole week, to the point where I had to come back and ended up living here. So thank you. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, it was just one of those things that there's something so true and real with what you offer. And I think it would be really powerful to explain a little bit more of maybe the modality that you work with and how you practice, so that people have a little bit of context of what I'm speaking to, because I won't be able to do it justice. I can just speak to the other side of it. But if you could explain a little bit more about your offering and your technique.
Yeah. Okay. Well, kia ora koutou whānau. Ko Dion Freeman. So my name's Dion, and the art that I practice mainly is called hono hono. And so hono hono, it literally means to join. And with Maori, sometimes when things are so good, we say them twice, especially with the healing modalities. So hono means to join, and hono hono, the way it was explained to me by my whānau, or family, was that we were joining or reconnecting to source. Not only our mind, our body, and our spirit, but also us as a being, we were connecting with our creator as well as our earth. And so in order to join a person to that, we need to clear out the clutter. And so yeah, this art was actually shown to me from my ancestors since I was a little kid. So I didn't really have a physical teacher per se. I just had to listen, really, and that's how it sort of came about. My first words as a child were taringas and whakarongo, which are quite long words. And my mother, who's not Maori, was a little bit sort of quizzed on how that came about, and thought I was sort of just jabbering. or making sounds. But
Mm.
I was being told by a female ancestor to use my ears and to listen. And yeah, so hono hono comes from the teachings of my ancestors, and I have a predominant ancestor who was quite famous in the 1930s um, for doing
Mm.
practicing hono hono. And back then it was quite taboo um, on two different levels. So in New Zealand in 1907, um, the practice of Maori healing was actually banned in New Zealand, and it was
Mm.
it was called the Tohunga Suppression Act. And so anyone practicing what I do now would be arrested. And I think back then the term of imprisonment was up to 18 months.
Wow.
And so he was, and basically because it was going against Christianity, and Maori have their own gods, and that they prayed to, and um,
Mm.
and then he was also, so his name was Riwai Pakaro, and he was also kind of going against Maoridom in the sense that uh, he wasn't communicating with the demigods, so to speak. He was going straight to the boss. And so
Mm.
the English term back then that was what he was known for was faith healing. And so he felt he had a direct connection with above, and um, so he was actually blinded by his cousin, and this led him to just being a full-time carver. So he was a master carver. He carved about 11 marae up along the east coast of
Wow.
the North Island, and through his blindness and or partial blindness, and working with the wood and nature and the patterns that were coming out of him, which also for the time period, if you have a look at any of his marae that he built, which are like meeting houses, um,
Mm.
yeah, some of them are quite. He was sort of at the time was frowned upon because he wasn't using traditional methods or patterns just in his carving, and but he was carving channeled patterns, and through this carving he established that he could heal, and so his moko or his grandchildren would take him around in horse and cart and around the North Island, and he would practice hono hono on anybody who needed help.
Mm.
And so I found all of this out after sort of 5 years hitchhiking the country with a massage table, practicing this, and I felt a calling to go to where my father's side of the family are from. I wanted to touch our marae and see if there was a connection there for myself, and it was actually from that trip that I found out what I was practicing was called hono hono from one of my relatives,
Mm.
and and then from touching the marae that my whānau are from, or my family are from, um, was when it sort of kicked up a notch for me from just being this traveling healer to, okay, I feel like I've come and touched a touchstone, or a really really important part of my journey. And yeah, that sort of led me to want to take this to the mainstream rather than it just be something that um, you know sort of float about and help whoever's in my presence. Rather, what I felt the calling to do then was actually to sort of set a foundation and offer this
Mm.
to the world.
Wow. I didn't even know all these things. That's so beautiful. That's amazing. That's really, really cool. So, what did it look like for you to bring it mainstream? Because quite often that can be something, especially going from just how deeply it was suppressed and oppressed, what it looks like to now kind of come out of those shadows and bring something that people would consider like esoteric or alternative or woo woo, which some
Yeah.
might say.
Yep.
How did you actually kind of keep that sense of integrity and truth bringing this back into the kind of light and into the mainstream? What did that look like?
So as I said, I sort of hitchhiked the country with a massage table for 5 years. So from the top of the North
Mm.
Island down to the very bottom of the south. And I was, I sort of call it God mode. I was letting above direct where I went, who I was going to work on. Um, you know, I left a lifestyle of a night lifestyle. So I owned a couple of nightclubs at the time, and
Mm.
the calling from my ancestors was too loud to ignore by then. And so I left the business world really not liking the business world and the structures of money and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
jazz. And so, yeah, I gave away all my worldly possessions, which took just over 4 months. And yeah,
Mm.
hitchhiked with this massage table. And to be honest, um, it was like led by a higher power because
Mm.
um, you know, I would have people just walk up to me randomly and tell me about their problems, and then I would offer my service for koha or donation of whatever they had or could afford or wanted to part with, or felt it would assist my journey. And a lot of times it was sort of accommodation, food, and move me on to the next lot of people
Right.
who needed work.
All right. So had a little glitch in the matrix there, um, but all good. So yeah, from working for Koha, I made it down to South Island, and I'm not sure how much the last one picked up, but I was actually guided uh, to go down to South Island from a psychic artist who I'd done a treatment on, and she told me that when the earth shook, it was time to be in the South Island and that that would be my home. Um, and at that time, I didn't know anyone. And then, yeah, so a year later, after doing all these healings in the North Island, um, yeah, I got a call on the day of the Christchurch earthquake, and it was the same artist, and she asked me if I was on the South Island yet, and I said no, and she was like, "Well, how much more does the Earth need to shake before you listen?" So yeah, pretty much booked my flights, and 4 days later, I was in South Island. Um, Started in Christchurch, got led to Golden Bay, Takaka, stayed there for quite a while, and yeah, then I had a friend sort of call me down to Dunedin, and that's where it sort of all kicked off as far as bringing this to mainstream.
Mm.
By the time I got to Dunedin, word of mouth had sort of gone before me, and so I had a whole bunch of clients sort of waiting for me there. Um, and then did a little stint on Stewart Island, and uh, yeah, and did 2 months living in a cave, living off the land, and trying to, I guess, find myself and ask for guidance for my next steps. And it was
Mm.
basically to set up shop. Um, if I had a place to work from, then people could come to me. Um, so yeah, went back to Dunedin and had a friend who I'd worked on who was a massage therapist, and she told me that her whole client base needed to see me, and that if I wanted a room, um, she would accommodate me. And so yeah, I worked for her for about 3 months, and then it yeah, it sort of became, well, she told me that I was earning too much for her tax bracket, so I had to start up my own business. And
Yep.
yeah, so it all sort of kicked off from there. So I had yeah, I meditated for a long time, and on a company name. I really didn't want to go back into business, but the
Mm.
the amount of people coming to see me, and not having to hitchhike everywhere and sort of worry about what I was going to eat or where I was going to be staying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it sort of shaped itself quite beautifully, and that led to teaching workshops.
Right.
Yeah.
So have you been met with, like, what does it look like to be met with any kind of resistance along the way? Because it all sounds like it really landed powerfully and beautifully and was really divinely guided. I'm curious to know what it was like on the flip side of that as well, like the times where maybe you did meet resistance or people maybe not understanding. What was it like in the kind of face of challenge or adversity when you were trying to take this to the mainstream, or were you met with any?
Um, I'm going to be honest with you. The challenge was actually myself.
Mm,
As I said, I didn't want a business, and in fact,
right.
that was the last thing I wanted, especially at that time. I sort of enjoyed the floating around, meeting new people, and through hono sort of learning their stories and learning um, how we're also similar in our feelings, no matter age, race, uh,
Mm-hmm.
wealth. That we are all human, and we carry these emotional blockages in our body, regardless of whether we've had it pretty cruisy or whether we've had it really rough. So I guess,
Yeah.
yeah, the resistance as far as mainstream, yeah, I didn't really come across it. I mean, there were definitely people who didn't understand. There were I
Mm,
definitely had a few people who sort of tried to call bullshit, which
yeah.
um, yeah, to that my answer has always been the proof's in the pudding. Get on the table, and uh, so
Right.
so any resistance was, you know, yeah, wasn't there for too long if they accepted that challenge to get on the table. I
Mm,
didn't have all the answers as far as how it was working scientifically, and all I was really worried about was that I was getting results for the people that I was working with.
mm, yeah. I love that. I think there's a lot of potency in being able to just kind of practice what you teach and lead by example and not have to necessarily always back it up, but let it kind of speak for itself. So it's really cool to hear that it wasn't met with as much maybe resistance or uncertainty as maybe I've seen elsewhere. So I'm wondering if maybe there's a difference culturally, because when I think
Yeah,
of all of this back home, being in Canada, there was a lot more, like, I guess, not necessarily just resistance, but people just being like, no, like, don't believe in it. It's hippie bullshit. Like, don't even,
yeah,
not going there. Whereas
yeah.
here, I do find it a little bit more open and a little bit more accepted. Do you think it's because of the close ties to the Maori culture, or what's been your experience with that?
I think to start off with, like um, South Island definitely, yeah, bugger all resistance, as you would call it. The North
Mm-hmm.
Island, when I first started, because I gave away all my worldly possessions, there was resistance at the start, but it was more along the lines of, well, you were this nightclub owner with flash things, and then you gave away everything, and now you're saying you can heal me. Um, yeah, I was a bit of a laughing stock for a few months there, and again, my thing was, well, the proof's in the pudding. Um, so
Yeah.
so either point the finger from a distance, and I don't really care anyway, or get on the table, and yeah, it's the easiest way for me to explain what I do is to um, help you to release these blockages and explain what the feelings are, and
Mm-hmm.
there comes a I mean, the body parts represent different parts, but as the healer, I also get to feel what they're releasing, and when that message is relayed back to the person, it's sort of um, I think very early on there was definitely some males that I worked on that were pretty buzzed out because the things that were coming out that were blockages were actually things that only them and God know, so to speak.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean
Wow.
there was a bit of resistance around where this was coming from, like as far as me being in tune with the creator. Well, as soon as I mentioned the God word, there was definitely resistance there. Um,
Yeah.
as, as far as what you're speaking on, as far as culturally, um, well, because uh, because of the Tohunga Suppression Act, I did find a fair bit of resistance with Maori actually, and it was along the lines of, "Who are you to be doing this work?" That was something that our elders used to do, and it's been lost. So who are you? And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so at the start, the resistance was sort of around that, um, and uh, yeah, and then by the time I'd sort of been on the South Island for a few years, again, word of mouth sort of spread further than I did. So by the time I sort of went
Mm.
back to work on people in the North Island, yeah, the resistance was definitely less. And then the more it came out about, um, the old ways of healing, um, now it's pretty accepted. Um,
Hmm.
traditionally, Maori healing was either herbs or touch, and so miri miri is a form. Um, it's a really powerful form of uh, what most people would deem as massage, um,
Yeah.
but very different from your standard therapeutic massage and or even
Mm.
relaxation massage. And
Yeah.
then romi romi, which is the deeper tissue um, work. That's again, it goes on a more spiritual way of um, deep tissue massage, and
Mm.
with with Maori culture, like if you look at the language, for instance, there's so much depth into each word, and it's a combination of other words, or so if you look at the language side of that, where every word has this deep intrinsic meaning, well, it's quite similar to the healing. Um, with
Mm.
romi romi, you're trying to get into those layers of trauma, and then I guess with hono hono, it does create a blockage for some people that you can help them without touching them. Um,
Right.
and then also that time and space don't really exist as far as healing goes. Like I can practice my work on somebody, say in Canada or in England. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I do think that the cultural side of things um, gives me a bit of freedom um, to,
Right.
to to practice under Maori healing. Um, yeah, it is a bit different to sort of the hippie bullshit as you call it.
Mm.
And yeah, I've definitely come across a fair bit of that. And, um, but my thing is around the highest intent. If you hold the highest intention for whatever it is you're doing in life, it's going to shine through and you'll be supported. And usually, if you're rocking the highest intent, you're guided to. So I think those things go
Mm.
hand in hand, regardless of culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you always had this kind of sense of trust in yourself and kind of integrity in what you do? Because what I see in you is this kind of strength and authenticity that I don't see in many. Like, it's very hard to come by that level of conviction in oneself. And like, you just speak so powerfully to everything that you do and what you offer. Like, there's such conviction in all that you say that you fundamentally wholeheartedly know this to be true and good for you. Have you always had that sense of personal integrity and conviction, or was that something that came with it? And I think why I'm curious about that is because it can be really hard to stay firm and concrete in what you're offering in today's kind of day and age when everyone's offering a million different things and there's so many different realities that we're working with, and people
Yeah,
think this thing is true and that thing is false and this and that, and there's so much going on in our world, but you seem to just kind of stand in the eye of the storm and hold that conviction. So have you always had that? And if not, how did you get it? And what would you kind of say to somebody who's looking to cultivate that or build it in themselves?
Okay, so um, I would thank you first and foremost. You never really know how other people sort of see you, and I'm going to be 100% honest with you right now. I have complete and total conviction in our Creator and the path that's sort of been set for
Mm.
me. I wouldn't say I have 100% conviction in myself. Um, and
Mm.
yeah, it's. I think the way I look at it with this work is I put the medicine first.
Yeah.
So I have 100% conviction in hono and that when you are connected with Source and you're connected and grounded and you hold the highest intent, that all will be okay. As far
Mm.
as myself as a human, I question myself every day. um,
Mm.
and yeah, and it's that checking in. Hang on, am is this with the highest intent, or am I operating on an old system of I want, um, or
Mm.
or am I being a martyr? And to be fair, the first few months of doing these treatments. Um, and actually, I could almost say the first 5 years, if we're talking about putting other people before myself. I
Right.
yeah, I knew there was magic in what I was doing. I think, if anything, I was probably trying to make amends for the time period that I wasn't doing this work. Um,
Mm.
I guess the difference from being a nightclub owner, where you're sort of, it's all about the money and the status, and um, and to be fair, at that time as well was sort of like I wanted to help people forget their stress, forget your worries, and
Right.
yeah, I held a conviction, I guess, as a nightclub owner that I'm gonna help people to have fun
Mm.
and then realize sort of the dark recess of that with well, actually drown your sorrows today and feel even more sorry for yourself tomorrow. So that was sort of a real crucial turning point for myself. Um, but yeah,
Mm.
I hold conviction in the greater good, and
Yeah.
I know my tools. I know what I'm working with, and then myself, I just have to get out of my own way. I definitely when Healing Aotearoa first started, I remember worrying like about, well, what if I do this and then um, you know, all right, kia ora, another glitch in the matrix, funny day with technology.
Right.
So yeah, I was just sort of finishing off saying that my conviction is more in the medicine rather than myself. Yeah, I'm still very human in that sense that self doubt creeps in, sometimes anxiety creeps in, and I hold true, I guess, for myself, my connection with Source, and that you know um, again, the proof being in the pudding that this way of healing really um, it's magic, and it's beautiful, and the people I get to work on, I'm helping them see their own beauty, I guess. So yeah, the conviction's more in the magic and trusting in
Mm.
Source. Um, yeah,
I
and
love that. So it's,
you had a, I think you had another question
yeah,
that was leading from there.
yeah, because I'm really curious to know what it looks like to kind of heal the parts of ourselves that maybe hold us back from having that conviction. Like, what do you think it is that kind of keeps us in that place of maybe not necessarily trusting ourselves, or not necessarily trusting the innate inner wisdom that we all hold? Do you think it's just too multifaceted and so different for everyone? Or do you think maybe there's certain things that we could potentially either look at or start to build a practice around, that we could maybe build that our own conviction in ourselves, and that own, like, our own sense of self-agency and trusting in that? What do you think that looks like?
Um, so again, for myself, going going to above, or that higher power, um, God, uh, the universe. But yeah, for Maori, there's the, the concept is Io, which is spelt I-O, and so that's the supreme creator, if you will. And I guess I've ever since I probably was about 3 or 4, I would talk to God, and then by the time religion was introduced to me at 5, um, I was very adamant that they had it wrong. And so for me, just having that trust uh, in above, that there was a plan. I think through my teens, it was definitely nah. I'm rebelling against everything. I've had a sort of shit upbringing, so I'm going to stop talking to God, and I'm just going to do it my way. And I think that's where
Yeah.
yeah, self doubt was definitely born in myself, um, and and yeah, I didn't really have very much support with any of the gifts that I had, because in a Catholic society, which I was sort of brought up in as a youngster, that was the devil type thing. Only preachers can talk with God, and actually you have to go through Jesus, and all this other sort of um, clouded stuff. So for me, um, yeah, I guess whenever I'm in doubt, I'll tune in and I'll ask above to just show me a way through whatever obstacles coming up. And if I'm the obstacle, um, yeah, I'll go get into nature. I'll make sure that I do those things that I need, or I will go and see a healer, or just get out into nature is usually where it's at. And I find when you're actually around less people, you have a stronger connection. So for me, it's tuning into that source energy, and knowing that I'm loved, having faith that I'm loved, and then I guess sort of yeah, just one thing that I talk about with the majority of my clients is, if they were to know somebody who had been through everything that they'd been through, if they'd known this person to have done all the things that they'd done, and they stepped back, would they like that person first and foremost? And most of the time, wouldn't that be somebody that you would admire for their strength, courage, taking all the knocks, having a real decent heart and wanting to help? And I haven't actually met anybody in my time that doesn't have a will to be loved, and doesn't have a will to love and share. So, and I've worked on some pretty interesting people in my time. So yeah, I think as far as moving into that self advocacy and confidence in self, um, would probably be around tuning into the divine. Know that that energy lives in you, and whatever you're passionate about, or whatever your gifts are, if you really tune into that source energy, I feel that they strengthen, and then that helps you to, I guess, strengthen your ability in yourself. I mentioned as a teenager, I sort of I cut off from that source, and I didn't want to know about it, and I didn't actually want to be a nice person. Um, According to a lot of people that knew me back then, there's mixed reviews. um, I always had a sort of sense of justice and looking out for the little person. Um, yeah, so I guess yeah, conviction in self is, if you're not doing something that you're passionate about or that you love or that's going to help people, it's hard to have conviction, in what you're
Mm-hmm.
up to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the emphasis on that focus and kind of giving it up to the higher purpose or the higher self or the source, God, spirit, universe, like whatever you want to call it. Everyone has their own variation and version, but I do really think that there's something so powerful in knowing that at whatever level there is absolutely something beyond ourselves. And I
yeah,
think it's really invaluable to put that emphasis on, like, when you can trust in that higher notion, whatever it is, not only does it take the pressure off of you and the way that you think you have to show up, but it allows you to kind of take a step back and just breathe that kind of sigh of relief to think that, okay, that like it doesn't all come down to the weight on my shoulders. There is something else at play here. There is something else that's guiding me and others and this whole web of the universe. So I do really think that's a powerful reminder to kind of tap back into that knowing that there's something beyond ourselves. I think that's really beautiful.
yeah. Me too.
So my next question would be, yeah, I have so many questions and I'm like, where do I go from here? There's just so much that I want to get into. When you see the kind of climate of the global world right now in terms of everything that's occurring, and you can kind of look at it in any way that you want, what do you think it is that it's going to take to kind of wake more people up to this notion of the power beyond ourselves? Because I think I see a lot of kind of just going through the motions and kind of being in this systemic and structural way of existing. And I do think that more and more people are kind of waking up to that inner knowing and that kind of notion of the higher purpose or higher structures. But what do you think it's going to take to actually wake more people up to that? Have you ever contemplated that or thought about it?
Yeah, since a kid. since I,
Yeah,
since I,
since
since
day
I,
one.
yeah, pretty much from when religion was introduced to me. Really, I was like, I remember being this little being and telling my mum that she had it so wrong, and
Mm,
I knew my mum didn't really believe in what she was trying to push on me either. It was just that it had been pushed on her, and so on and so forth. And I
right.
think that these so-called rules and regulations on, and punishments if you don't, were
Mm,
things that were sort of made to control. Um, so I guess what I'm seeing in the world today, and especially with this COVID-19, I'm
mm-hmm.
really hoping it's a blessing in disguise. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think, let's just say in the last 10 years, the same people who made fun of me, pointed the finger at me as you know, um, not being valid or whatnot. In the last 10 years, the majority of those people have either come to me when they've had their spiritual
Mm,
awakening, and then asked for guidance, or um, they've seen or heard things, um, either about the work I do, or
right.
yeah, they know somebody who's of sound mind who's come to see me, and
Hmm.
it's really changed their way. And then, just in New Zealand, for instance, rural New Zealand, I spent a lot of last year working in Gore, which is a farming community, and very sort of short, stubbies, tough men, hard workers,
Mm,
extremely hard workers, back breaking, to the point of
yeah.
that's why they would need to come and see me because of the physical issues, which is again the stagnated energy.
Mhm.
And I remember one for instance, I said I was going to use crystals, and he was like, "What's what's that rock going to do? It's just a rock." And then I put it on his heart, and then the amount of rumbles that sort of came thundering out of his belly, and he just looked at me, and I was like, "Oh, are you hungry?" And we both just cracked up laughing because he knew that this rock helped release um, helped release the issues in his heart. And you know,
I love it.
and I think the thing is logic and science is only just starting to catch up with some of the spiritual aspects of life, and
Mhm.
we've been ingrained in this dogma of rules, society, law, science, and I guess the magic was sort of not really allowed to be there. You know, we just look back a few generations ago, and people were getting burnt at the stake for having gifts, or
Yeah.
you know, locked in institutions, and so I think where in what I'm seeing is there is a shift, and
Mhm.
it's quite a beautiful thing to watch. And even for myself, in personal sort of journey with it, shift a shift in consciousness is not necessarily a fun or graceful thing. It can be brutal, and you know, some people don't don't make it past that. You know,
Yeah.
I know of a few of my friends who were, they're sort of um, just starting to wake up, and their option actually was to check out because
Mhm.
they didn't, you know, they they didn't want to go through any more pain and heartache, or you know,
Yeah.
I remember feeling this myself, like trying to wake up my family, and um, and just being met with resistance. You know, for instance, you gave away
Mm.
all your material possessions. You're insane. You're an idiot. You
Mhm.
didn't give it to any of the family. What the heck? You know, like, um,
Mm.
and and then after 2 years, my family's sort of hearing about the work I was doing, and they're like, "Well, I want to try that." And then after
Mm.
giving my family members sessions, they're now my quietest cheerleaders. um, yeah,
Oh, I love
and
that.
again, it's partly because of the way they were brought up. You don't talk about that stuff, and you don't, you know, you leave that stuff for the priests and the pastors. And
Mhm.
I guess going back to the religious sort of side of things, my full belief system was that Jesus was, you know, trying to show us how we can be, rather than telling us
Mm.
what to do. Um, so yeah,
Mhm.
again, I'm not really, I'm not fixed on any religion. I think they all have a wealth of knowledge, and probably viewing the creator from different aspects. But for me myself, I definitely ask people to tune in to their higher self first, and then see where that takes them. You know, um,
Mhm.
I think this COVID-19 is, well, I'm quite aware with some of the people that are getting in touch with me for distance sessions at the moment, that they've got this free time now. They're starting to meditate. They're
Yeah.
starting to look inwards, and uh, you know, long term, honestly, this is probably the downtime that we need for a whole bunch of people to find their true calling, to find their purpose,
Yeah.
or at least to find some light and love, um, you know, for themselves or for their family, or appreciation
Mhm.
for nature. Um, I spent from 19 to 25 on lockdown, for being an angry teenager, and that was life changing for me. And when you sort of,
Mm.
when you're stuck inside, and you only, you know, I call it sort of facing your demons. But when you
Yeah.
take a good look at who you've become to that point, and and is that the life that you actually want to leave, and you do that soul searching, that inner work on, what am I actually here for?
Mm.
I think this leads to massive change. rather than what's expected of you: get a job, pay the bills, get a mortgage,
Exactly.
have children, do all that stuff, and I work on a lot of people who aren't actually happy, but they've just gone through those motions. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
hoping that this lockdown scenario is going to help the shift, and who knows, maybe
Mhm.
it's the graceful shift where you do it instead of everybody waking up at the same time and chaos sort of coming about. Yeah,
Yeah, because I think about when I went through my whole, I like transition, quarter life crisis, spiritual awakening, like whatever you want to call it, all of it. It was so uncomfortable and it was excruciatingly difficult
yeah,
because not only did I not have someone to kind of guide me through it, like I didn't know what was happening. I didn't have anyone that I could really turn to and talk to about it. I ended up working with a Native American shaman back home in Canada, and that was the closest I got to somebody actually understanding what I was experiencing and what I was going through. I thought I was going crazy. I really thought I was like losing the plot and that something was just not okay.
yeah,
And it wasn't really until I came, probably actually till I came to New Zealand and started actually connecting with people who were a little bit more like-minded, open-minded and open-hearted, and actually work in these modalities and these different kind of healing side of things, that I actually felt heard, and I actually felt like, oh, this is a thing that it's okay, it's this isn't this big scary thing that it was made out to be, because I had no idea what was happening, because you are faced with your demons, you are faced with all of your darkness that kind of resides in the shadows, and it all kind of comes up at once if that's kind of the path that you've taken. I know it's different for everyone and people will experience it in different ways, and I think we kind of have this misconception around what a spiritual awakening or this new awareness looks like. I think some people can talk about it in a way that it's like it's all rainbows and butterflies on the other side,
mhm,
but they kind of negate the fact that it's absolute torture and hell as you get there. And I
yeah,
was just so unaware of that. And I think I was kind of in the coming out of the other side of it when I actually started working with you. I wasn't necessarily in the thick of it anymore, but I was coming out the other side. And I just remember having a conversation with you, and you just made it like it was that moment where everything was okay. And I was like, oh, okay. This is the rainbows that people were talking about on the
yeah,
other side of this thing. Got it. Because
yeah,
I think what I really value about the way that you work is there isn't necessarily that focus on quote unquote you have to feel it to heal it, because I don't necessarily believe in that. I don't think we need to really live into our traumas or relive the parts of us that are hurting or wounded. I think we can transmute and transmit those wounds and that hurt part of ourselves in a very different way that doesn't necessarily have to be as re-traumatizing and painful as it can be made out to be. So
yeah.
is has that am I right in thinking that you don't work in that way of kind of reliving things, but more so just the transmutation of it and removing the blockages so that energy can kind of flow a little bit more freely? Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, totally. I, I'm a big believer that you don't need to continue suffering. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes, like what's that Shrek saying? Onions have layers. We're
Mm.
we're we're very much like that, and
Yeah.
um, I I think that you can transmute or gift back to our creator a big portion of your trauma. You'll always get the triggers pop up,
Hmm.
and I guess they become less triggering. Um, and I also feel that a lot of us are carrying around trauma from ancestors, grandparents, great grandparents, and throughout the family line. And I don't believe that that's. Um, I believe that if you're wanting to heal that on behalf of your family, um, that that it can stop there with you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I haven't actually heard that saying you got to feel it to heal it. I definitely believe
Mm,
that you would have felt it during the course of it happening, maybe. And
exactly.
but yeah, awareness, acknowledgement, are probably some good places to start.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even for myself, I know when it's time for me to go and see somebody to work
Yeah.
through some stuff. I also am aware of when my body needs plant medicine, that it's not something that can just be healed. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that I do have to go back into the recesses of it, um,
Yeah.
and sort of take out the hinge that's keeping it there. And
Mm,
and that again comes through that inner work, and that can be real brutal,
yeah.
that changeover. And um, it's a consistency thing, like
Mm-hmm.
you can't just sort of turn up to one session and think that that miracle is going to fix everything. Um,
Yeah.
and I always give my uh, clients, or people who come to see me, um, I always give them homework, um, and
Mm-hmm.
and and that means that they're meeting that responsibility of
Yeah.
working on themselves rather than just looking for that quick fix.
Yes. Yeah. That's huge. That's such a big part of it. That
Yeah,
ownership and actually taking responsibility and not thinking that it's up to somebody else to fix or heal you. It is truly, it can only ever come down to you taking that ownership and seeing the thing that it is and doing the work, really, like showing up for yourself and showing up for your community, because it's an act of love. When you do self work, it is truly an act of love towards yourself, but towards your family, your friends, and your community, because you're working towards being that best version of yourself and looking to actually work with and through the wounds that have caused other suffering so that we
yeah,
can minimize it and make it a little bit less painful for everyone. So that ownership piece is so, so big. And I
yeah,
think there's a lot that can be said for this time of kind of forced self retreat and being in that space of silence and stillness with ourselves, because it's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of life and the busyness of all that's unfolding, especially if you look at what's happening globally. It can become overwhelming, but now is
yeah,
this time where
definitely.
we can just like sit and be with it and say, okay, let's figure out what the next step is, rather than focusing on going back to normal, because normal wasn't working. Normal wasn't a thing that was supportive or sustainable. So,
Yeah,
to step out the other side of this, we really have to be in a space of truth and power and authenticity in so many different ways. So, I really,
yeah.
really love that. And I'm going to link up to all of um, your offerings as well, so that people can reach out to you if they're called to do so, because it is such a profound path once you start going down it. And I really do value everything that you bring to the table. And I have one final question for you, and it's my
Okay,
favorite question. And
okay,
I'm really intrigued to see what you say, especially like considering everything that's going on in the world. Like you can just take this in so many different directions. But my question
okay.
is, when you think of the world as it is, what is one big change that you would want to make, or one big norm that you would want to disrupt? Like, what's that one thing where you're like, this has to change? And then tell me your why.
Okay. So I can see how this question could open up heaps of different
Yeah.
trajectories of worms. Um, I'm gonna go back to tuning into source,
Mm,
because I feel that's what will save us.
Mhm.
because I don't actually, I believe that all the bad shit that's happening in the world and that has happened previously is mainly come down to sort of humans' free will. Um,
Yeah.
and that free will, I guess there's people who have taken advantage of it, as far as, well, I want, and I'm going to
Mhm.
do, I've got a good intention that's going to serve me well, and it might not serve everyone else well, but it's going to serve me well. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, so I think if we take away from that, and we can rock this highest intent, the highest intent causes no harm. And I think right now
Mhm.
that's sort of what the world needs, and especially, there's growing pains going on,
Mm.
especially on the internet at the moment, with so many people fighting for an opinion, and
Yeah.
discrediting others, and all that sort of jazz. And um, I've been guilty of some of this early on, with pushing my views really, really loudly. Like, it's almost like I'm standing on a soapbox and screaming, wake
Right.
up, people, wake up.
Yeah.
Especially 10 years ago, I was raw, and I guess I was going for that wow factor to wake people up. And then, I sort of realized, hang on, this is this isn't the highest intent. Again, this is a good intention. I'm trying to wake you people up, but I'm not taking into account your whole lives. Um, Everything
Right.
that's led you to this belief system, I'm just shouting at you to change. And actually, um, you know, maybe if I lead by example, and that's
Mm.
actually how it sort of happened when I sort of just calmed down, because I was, I'd learned all these things of how corrupt the current system is, and I wanted people to wake up from it.
Mhm.
And I see it still going on today. Um, and I still have my own sort of conspiracy theories that sort of float around, and but take all
Mhm.
of that stuff aside, and asking above, with the highest intent, what am I here for? What's my purpose? How can I be of service? I think
Yeah.
that's where it's at. And when you tune into above, I'm pretty sure it lights up all of the different experiences in you that have made you feel joy, have made you feel great, have passed on that
Mhm.
feeling to those around you. This is probably a purpose, and this is probably an avenue to exercise. And yeah, I believe that if we don't tune into above, it's really easy for the ego to sort of trick us into, um, well, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and this makes me amazing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's probably where I would say, I've thought this since a teenager, actually. Before I
Mm.
sort of gave up on the spiritual stuff, I remember sort of wagging school, sitting on a basketball court, smoking a joint, and looking up at the clouds. And I was like, man, what if everybody just stopped for one moment, looked up, and asked, what the heck? What am I here for? What am I supposed to
Mm.
be doing? And we all tuned
Yeah.
in. We'd probably get the answer. But yeah, and
Absolutely.
I also remember being that same teenager and thinking, one day the world's going to stop. It's going to shut down. It's going to close its doors, and it's going to, you know give us some time to reflect, and it's going to give us some time to appreciate what we take for granted. And I believe we're here right now. Um,
Yeah, it's happening.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, all those times that I was wagging school and philosopher,
Yeah.
coming up with my own philosophies on life, sort of, in, yeah,
I
in
love it.
timing with what's going on now. So, um,
Mm.
yeah, I think that's where it's at. Tune in, tune into yourself, tune into above. And I think, is you know we live on this beautiful planet, and yeah, let's, like, maybe look after it and enjoy it. So I think that's the
Mhm.
one thing. If I could put forward a proposal for the rest of humanity to sort
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Yeah, I really love that notion of like quietly and humbly leading by example as well, because I think I have a very similar tendency. When my inner activist gets ignited,
Yeah.
I can go, yeah, like I can go on a rant real quick. And I'm
Yeah.
like, figure it out, people, like wake up. This isn't okay. And then I'm like, okay, whoa, take a breath because you're not going to change anything that way. And I really have to remind myself, come back to you, come back to your center, keep living the way that you're living, live well, live clean, live wholehearted, and let people figure it out for themselves, because we are on this similar journey, but we're all in kind of different phases and taking it in different strides. So it really is that kind of that humility and that leading by example in that quiet kind of way, because that's when people take notice. It's not necessarily the loudest people in the room that get the attention at the end of the day. Like they might get their
Yeah.
moment when they're being loud, but it peters out really quick.
Yeah.
So I really love that. I really, really love that. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you so much for your candid honesty and your vulnerability. It's so refreshing and really illuminating and inspiring to see. So I really appreciate that you continue to show up in the way that you do. And I will definitely link out to all of your offerings so that people know where to find you, how to get in touch. And I just can't wait to see what you keep creating within all of this and on the flip side of it. So thank you,
Yeah.
Dion.
Well, right back at you, Amanda. I'm so stoked. Yeah, you're a great welcome to Queenstown, and just seeing where you've taken yourself. You know, uh, from the first treatment I did with you, and then the workshops, and just
Mm,
exponential growth is amazing. And again, what you're offering, and how far it's reaching is yeah, that's inspiring for me. Yeah,
mm.
you're magic. So keep rocking the magic, and yeah, and inspiring others to do the same. It's a really beautiful thing to watch.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. And if there's anything at all that you want to explore or you have ideas about and want to get into, please drop me a line. You can find us at the Self Agency Advocate on both Facebook and Instagram. And I would absolutely love to chat. So let's connect.